Okay, this is the last video in the GlobalConnect LYNK installation series, and we're going to talk about wrapping up the installations at the machines. And this video assumes that you've watched already the detailed wiring videos for the LYNK B and the LYNK F units. So here we're going to cover completing the installation and powering up the machines for the first time with the telemeters in them. What you'll see on the screen and troubleshooting steps. Going through the auto registration process that has to be completed, what gets sent to your VMS person, and then we're going to talk a little bit about sending DEX files to your vending management system, and that can either be done with a service DEX option, mainly for your drivers, or you'll have to install a DEX Y cable if your VMS system requires that the drivers DEX the machine during the service, and that's mainly for Streamware VMS customers. Okay, I'm assuming that most of the people here have already installed telemeters, so we're not going to go into the all the details of that, but we're going to start out with one big tip here, and this can save you a lot of time. So if you're planning on putting the LYNK terminals into a bank of machines, once you've done a few, you're going to realize that the startup sequence, especially if they have to do an update, which is more likely as we're just releasing the product, because we're doing updates every couple of weeks, and yours were likely shipped or manufactured prior to that. If you're doing a bank of machines, you might as well, if possible, without disrupting the location, open up all the machines, leave the existing telemeters in there, and then connect the LYNK telemeters and get them MDB and an antenna and just power them all up, because that will allow them to go through all the way to the registration screen and complete any updates. And in this video later on, we're going to show you what the screens look like if the telemeters can't get a cellular signal. So if that ends up being a problem, in the United States, there are Verizon and AT&T telemeters. Unfortunately, there are different units. So chances are, if one in a bank is bad, they're all going to be bad in a bank. So before you install everything and then check it, if you find out you've got signal issues, you can switch to the other ones. If you're using Verizon, you can switch to AT&T, or if you're using AT&T, you can switch to Verizon. If you're in Canada, the SIMs that we use up in Canada actually can switch to 4 networks. So if you can't get a signal up in Canada, you're going to have to do some other options, which we'll talk about when we get there. Okay, and these are just general tips, and I'm sure you're familiar with most of these, but you obviously want to bring all the right equipment, and that way you don't have to jury rig or cut corners. You want to zip tie all loose cables to provide strain relief where possible, but you don't want to zip tie cables so tight that they're going to bend or bind and wear or break, or when you open up the door, they get pulled. The antenna must be tight, but you don't want to over tighten it so much, because the antenna connector is just soldered onto the printed circuit board. But a antenna that isn't tight likely won't be grounded properly, so it's going to cause signal problems down the road. And the antennas on the B units are somewhat frustrating to tighten, so you can do that with your fingertips. That's shown in the video, and there's also a special tool to make that easier. So this step is really important. You have to complete all the self-checks and send the correct machine for registration, or the telemeter's not going to be registered and it's not going to run properly. It probably won't be able to do cashless transactions. It's not going to send the DEX file to the right machine. And if you do put in the wrong machine number during registration, you can do a machine move afterwards. Another tip is, if you're using a DEX Y cable, very often the drivers will, because they're used to, or because they're used to something else, they'll unplug the DEX Y cable and plug in and read the vending machine controller directly. Then they'll forget to plug in the DEX Y cable. So what you want to do is you want to use in the video here we're going to show, we actually used masking tape when we wrote DEX and put a big arrow pointing to the DEX port, but you want to basically mark which one they're supposed to read, and then you want to try and tape up the one that's supposed to be permanently connected. And if you can't successfully read DEX, you really shouldn't leave the telemeter in the machine. And as of right now, we can read all machines except for AP 120 series and some newer machines. So we're actually working. We've got a fix already for the AP 120s, but I'm doing this video at May 16th, so that'll probably be out by the end of this month. But all other machines you should be able to DEX, and if you can't DEX, it's likely a wiring problem, which we'll go over. Okay, this video is going to show you the startup of the terminal for the first time, beginning to end, including a software update, which is pretty likely. And we're going to zip through this a little bit faster than the screen recording, but I want you to keep an eye on the time on the bottom. So here we go, and this is in real time here. So this is the first screen you're going to see when it boots up. And this is the operating system of the terminal booting. And it's going to flash. And then it's going to immediately load our bootloader application. So this is GlobalConnect codes starting here. Okay, and the bootloader basically does two things. It figures out what cellular the cellular settings are, and so it's done that already. Now it's connected to the internet, and it will check for updates, and then it logs the versions, then it calls the main application. So the connecting to internet right here for the first time, this should take less than 20 seconds. Okay, I'm going to pause it here. This is a 5-second screen that's going to show up. You can't cancel out of this screen, because if you do, it's going to not check for updates, and there's a possibility that you need an update in order for the telemeter to run properly against our server. So we're going to let this go. This is going to time out here, so don't touch anything. And then it's going to start looking for updates. And this process, if there are no updates, it will get through this within probably 10 or 15 seconds or less. I will say that if it gets stuck on this screen for more than a minute or two, you can unplug the telemeter and start over, because it will eventually time out of that, but it may take a long time. But you got to be patient, so wait at least 20 or 30 seconds. Okay, so right now, as soon as you see screens that say CTMS at the top, that means it did find an update, and it is going to do the update. So at this point, again, if you don't see the CTMS in black across the top, there's no update to be done. But in this case, it's going to, the terminals we initially shipped were on version 11.51. It's going to update them to, actually, now we'll update them to 11.54. So this is updating to 11.53. So I'm going to go ahead and speed pass through this. So now you're at 2 minutes. So I'm going to do the update. So that downloads in about 30 seconds. Now it's going to do the update. And then it's going to reboot. And now we're back at the beginning. Except this time, when it goes through the screens, so I'll scroll kind of through them. Same thing, connecting to the internet. It's going to check for updates. Update initializing. Now it's not going to do anything. It's going to go to checking versions. Okay, and keep in mind you're at 449 now. And we'll just let it go. And then it's going to leave the bootloader application, and it's going to go ahead into the main application, which will come up here. Okay, and let me just tell you what's on here. So this is the serial number of the terminal right here. We include 3 leading digits, and that's the way your VMS will see it. And this is the number that's on the back of the terminal. This is the app version. This is actually connected to AT&T. So it's saying here, and the APN, that's just a setting. Okay, in this case here, actually, I didn't plug in the MDB to show you something. So if it is stuck on this screen right here, This means that the terminal got power, but if it's stuck here, it's not able to talk on the MDB line. And the possibilities for that are that you didn't connect it in between the build validator and the VMC, or if there's other telemetry equipment on that you didn't take off yet. For example, if you were trying this to see if we would get a signal first, it may still be connected to MDB, in which case our device would not be able to connect to MDB. So what I'm doing now is I powered the device separately. I'm plugging in MDB, and then you're going to see it is actually going to work. So it will be stuck on this machine, on this screen, until it can talk to the VMC. So it is going to be able to talk to the VMC in just a second, and because I did just plug it in, and very quickly the light will come on. And let me just explain, if the device wasn't disconnected, it would normally go to finding the carrier, and then it would be able to connect to MDB, and the lights would come on within 5 to 10 seconds. So it wouldn't take nearly this long. Okay, and then once it's here, once you get here and the lights come on, if the terminal is already registered, which this one isn't, it's going to be right into the main screen, and it's like ready to go. This one is not registered, and it's going to get stuck here, or it's not going to get stuck here. It's going to ask you to register the telemeter, and that's what this screen is here. So we're going to pause this video right now, and I'm actually going to go directly on to another video. Okay, so this is the same video. Okay, in this video, we're going to show what happens when there's an antenna problem. So we're going to go fast forward. It's booting, now it's connecting to the internet. So in this case, if it can't get a signal, the antenna is not connected properly, or some other problem with the signal, it's going to get stuck on this screen for a long time, and then it's going to start trying other settings. But I can tell you at this point, if you get here, I'm going to go fast through here. Now it's going to check different settings. It's going to go through them all. Basically, this means it's basically not getting signal. So if it won't get past this point, it says GlobalConnect bootloader and getting signal, you know you don't have a connection. So you should check your antenna first of all, and make sure the connectors are tight. Second of all, if you reuse the antenna that was on there from a previous telemeter, you should actually take that off and replace it with ours, because ours has some LTE band coverage that the other one you reused might not have. And then if you can't get a signal from here, what you should do is you should, if you're using AT&T, which this one is, you should switch to a Verizon telemeter, or if you're using Verizon, you should try an AT&T telemeter. And if you're in Canada, the single SIM that we use can connect on the 4 largest operators. So if you can't get a signal, then the next things you can do is you can order a high gain antenna. So Vendors Exchange is going to have those. Also, there are some ones we can recommend short term on Amazon that would work better. And then after that, the next option is you got to use some sort of active, which means it's plugged in building repeater. So if you get to that point, you should contact us, and we will try and help you out. Okay, now we're going through the registration self-check screen. So what's going to happen now is it's connecting to the internet. It's going to initialize MDB, and this will actually show you how fast this should normally happen. So in about 10 seconds, the light should come on. There we go. And then it's going to go to the registration screens. And the first screen that it's going to go to is going to ask you for your okay, it's going to ask you for your operator ID. So I'm pausing here. So your operator ID is normally 2 to 4 characters, and it will be provided to you. If it's not provided to you, you should call in right now, because you're not going to be able to get past the screen, and the telemeter will never get past the screen. So I'm going to put in my test operator ID, which is 99. So I'm going to put that in. Oh, this is 1234. Sorry. Okay, and then I think my password. Then it's going to ask you for your operator PIN. So operator PIN. So it's going to ask you for your. Let me start over. It's going to ask you for your operator ID, which is the number that identifies your operator. You're going to have a registration PIN, which is another number that's provided to you. Normally that's the same as the service menu PIN. And then it's going to ask you for the machine number. So I'm going to do that. Okay, and then the machine ID is the physical asset number at your company where the of the machine that this telemeter is being placed in. And what this is going to do is this is going to generate an email to your VMS person, and what they're going to do is they're then going to get an email that says what machine this telemeter was installed at, and I'm going to show those in a second. Okay, so it's going to say device registered, and then it's going to go through the self-test. So the first self-test, there's 4, is communication. So you can go ahead and hit the communication button. Okay, so that's good. And it also gets the signal strength. So now it's going to ask you to do a credit card check. So you can actually use your own personal credit card for this, because what it's going to do is it's going to do a $1 charge, and then it's going to immediately reverse it. So if it fails, it's not going to do either, and if it's successful, it's going to do the charge and then reverse it. So there's no harm to you. So I'm going to do that, and I'm going to use my phone, which has Google Pay, and it's taking a little bit longer than a normal credit card here, because again it's doing 2 transactions. Okay, now it's going to ask you to check the GlobalConnect card, which is your US Connect card, and that has to be done with a magnetic stripe. So we're going to do that. And if I remember correctly in this video, the first time I didn't swipe it right, because it was yep, that failed. I'm going to try it again. You have to swipe evenly. Okay, it's just going to check the balance, and obviously my balance is really high because it's the test card on our test server. And then this is the important part. You've got to test the DEX. And on Cantaloupe systems, this part is especially important because it will send a DEX all the way to Cantaloupe. And since you're a VMS operator who just got the email that said you registered at a certain machine, then they'll get the DEX file, and basically before you leave the building, this telemeter will be set up and able to read DEX and send DEX into Cantaloupe. So you need to do this check. The other thing is I wanted to say about this check is if it is having problems with DEX, this check can take up to 90 seconds, which is a long time. So basically it should read it within the first 10-20 seconds, or it's going to take a long time to time out. So if it doesn't read it right away, you can do some other things and then let it finish, and then it's going to go ahead and be up and running. And then the terminal is ready to go at this point, and I don't think there's anything else on this video. Yeah, this is just me doing a test transaction. So here I'll go through that again. So here it's just ready for payment, and I'm going to hold my phone in front of it, and it's going to go ahead and then I made a selection, and it's going to go ahead and process the payment. So this terminal is up and running. Okay, once you can finish the device registration self-check, we're going to switch now and take a look at what the VMS operator inside your company will we'll see. And we're covering this here because this is kind of will happen in real time. So when you finish the registration, 2 emails are going to get, and the self checks, 2 emails are going to get sent to the vending machine operator. And I just want to point out, so it's really important that your vending machine operator has to complete the step of assigning the telemeter to the machine that it is placed in at the VMS. Otherwise, we won't know for planogram and DEX files and other information what machine the telemeter was sent at. However, you're making it a lot easier for them because by you putting the number into the telemeter screen when you're registering it, it'll cause these emails to be generated. And you have to follow your vending management system's instructions for third-party telemeters. And okay, so we're going to go on. So the first email that the VMS operator is going to get is the registration email, and basically that'll come from no reply registration is at globalconnect.biz. It will have the device serial number, which is the telemeter ID, and it's going to show up with 3 leading zeros for the VMS operator, but these digits right here, which is 12 digits, are what it appears on the back of the terminal. So if you look at the back of the terminal, you can read off these numbers. Just realize that there's 3 leading digits in the VMS. The second line here shows the available MIDs and TIDs. So this basically, when you're registering a bunch of emails, we configure you with a pool of MIDs and TIDs from Heartland or Global Payments, and you should have enough never to worry about it. But if this ever gets low, you will get additional warning emails, and also you need to call into Global Connect's customer support because as soon as this number runs out, you won't be able to register telemeters anymore. And I just want to point out for Canada Connect operators, it can take us 3 or 4 days to get the to get more TIDs and MIDs. Usually in the United States, we can get them right away. The machine ID here, this is probably the most important field. This is your asset number, your machine number that you're going to set up this telemeter under. And if it's in Cantaloupe, you're going to assign the DEX file that number. Merchant ID and terminal ID are the Heartland MID and TID that this terminal is using in this machine. Okay, the second email that's going to come across is the device self-check email. And again, this will come across as soon as you're done sending the device check. So what it's going to say is the operator. It's going to say the APN, which is a cellular setting, and it's going to say the signal strength. In this case, I was actually doing this without the antenna plugged in, which somehow worked because we were right next to the window and the cell tower. You could see right out the window. Normally, you'd never get a connection that way, but this is showing a signal strength of 19th. Generally, 20 or plus is best, but I'll tell you, if you can get to the self-check screens and you don't get errors at the beginning while you're at the machine, then that means the signal strength should be good enough to go. These are SIM numbers that you don't need to concern yourself with. And then down here, it'll tell you which COM port was used for DEXing, using the old version of the DEX Y Cable and certain terminals. That can be different. It'll show the last communications check. It'll show the transaction ID and the reversal transaction ID of the 2 transactions that were done as the self-check. And if one of these is missing, I suppose something may have gone wrong, but I've never seen that happen. And then this is the Global Connect card transaction. It'll show the account number, the balance, the points, and other stuff. The DEX file will be attached for your reference up here. That's just if you want to look at it, you can see it'll look like something like this. And then just wanted to point out on May 12th or thereabouts, we made a change so that as soon as this email is generated, as soon as this email is generated, a The DEX file will get sent to Cantaloupe as a scheduled DEX file, not a service DEX file, so that whoever's the VMS operator should be able to assign that DEX file probably within 2 minutes of you completing the registration. That'll complete the setup of that machine on the VMS side. Okay, that's it for these. Okay, here we're going to talk about the optional DEX Y cable. You would only need the DEX Y cable if your VMS requires your drivers to DEX the machine while they're servicing them. And the purpose of the DEX Y cable is so they don't need to unplug the telemeter from the VMS to DEX it with their handheld or with their Bluetooth key, because they typically forget to put the DEX cable back in for the telemeter. So the DEX Y cable solves that problem. So this is the part. It's an optional part that gets orders from vendors exchange. It's basically got 2 female jacks, but they're very different, and a male jack. So to make it easy, the male jack plugs into the DEX, the female DEX port on the VMS. So this is going to read from the VMS. The non-switching jack, which is the straightforward one, will get plugged. You plug the male connector from the telemeter into that one here, and then in the bigger jack, which is has both wires wired to it, this is the switching jack. This is going to be left so that your driver can stick his handheld or Bluetooth key into it. And on this cable, this needs to be mounted. So you're going to need to drill a hole in the machine and mount this. And again, just for reference, if you want to pause it here, this is the switching jack. The handheld or Bluetooth key plugs into here. This is the female jack that's left permanently plugged into the telemeter's male DEX port. Then this is the male DEX port from the DEX Y cable, which gets permanently plugged into the VMS. So next we're going to show a video. Okay, so here we're going to show installing the DEX Y cable. This is the new DEX Y cable right here, with this end on it, onto a UPT B or LYNK B unit. So in this case, you're going to have what's called the serial cable plugged in up here. It's going to have 2 ends on it. One is the DEX cable and one is this. You're not going to use this. So this is the DEX cable. That's going to go to get plugged into. You're plugging it into down there. So we're going to. That's going to get plugged into that side of the DEX Y cable. This part of the DEX Y cable, remember the silver one, is going to get plugged into the original DEX jack. So in this case, we were actually going to remove this jack and use this hole for the new switching cable, but we can't because it's stripped. So we're going to drill a new hole right here, and then we're going to mount this switch behind here and screw it in. So things to remember about the DEX cable is the jack here has to be mounted somewhere because it's not really protected, but the switching jack is where the driver's going to install the handheld into. The other female jack is where you're going to install the telemeter into, which is right here. And then the kind of silver plug here, male plug, is going to go into the original DEX jack. So with that, we're going to drill a hole and so we're going to put this one up high so it's easier for the driver. So this is going to go back behind here. We'll take this off here. And then mount it back there. Hold on. There we go. You want to screw it back on? Oh, yeah, okay. Okay, so we drilled a new hole. We put in the handheld DEX port here. This is the switching back from the DEX Y cable. put some tape on here so this will stay connected, and then the driver will use this port from now on. And now we're just going to put together the rest of the machine and cable tie everything.